State of Samadhi. When Mother was approached with a prayer to let us know the various stages of sadhana, she indicated 4 levels. The first, concentration of intellectual powers on a focal point. It is like setting fire to dry fuel. When wet wood has been dried by the heat of fire, the flames blaze up brightly. Similarly, when by the force of contemplation of the divine, our mind is released from the mist and moisture of desires and passions, it becomes light. It is a condition of mental purity which induces, in certain cases, a state of silent merging into a particular mood or into an excess of emotion and agitation beyond one's power of control. All these moods emanate from one supreme existence, but only in special directions. Secondly, concentration of one's emotional powers. It brings in a state of bodily inertness, of absorption in one holy sentiment arising out of the one indivisible supramental state. At this level, the body may be likened to a burnt charcoal, with the fire apparently gone out. In this state, the devotee passes hours together in outer inertness, but in the core of his heart surges up an unceasing current of sublime emotion. When this state matures, the sentiment draws mighty powers from the all-soul, and just as a vessel overflows when too much water is poured into it, it spreads out over the whole world in a mighty sweep under the intense pressure of expansiveness. Thirdly, fusion of the inner and outer life. This state is just like that of burning coal. Fire pervades every atom of the inner and outer sheaths. All are aglow with one divine light. The devotee lives, moves, and has his being in one blissful ocean of light. And the fourth is full concentration, when the devotee loses all consciousness of duality, of the functioning of the 3 gunas. It is like the state of coal burnt to ashes. There is no distinction of the inner and the outer, of here and there. It is a state of absorption in the supreme, of all oneness. Vibrations of thought, feeling, or willing vanish altogether. It resembles the perfect tranquility of a sleeping lake under a blue sky. Mother's Samadhi presents a wonderful sight. It was by my extreme good luck to be able to witness such Samadhi several times. I note below some of my experiences. On some days, while walking about or sitting in the room after casually entering it or after laughing and speaking a few words, her eyes became wide open with a vacant stare, and all her limbs relaxed in such a supernatural way that her body seemed to melt down on the floor. We could observe then that, like the soft golden disk of the setting sun, all the brightness of her normal manners and expressions faded away little by little from her countenance into some mysterious depths. A short while later, her breathing slowed down, sometimes stopping altogether, and her speech ceased completely, and her eyes remained closed. Her body grew cold. Sometimes her hands and feet became as stiff as logs of wood, and sometimes they hung down loosely like pieces of rope, falling flat in any direction one would place them. Her face glowed with a crimson hue due to the intensity of the inner anandam. Her cheeks shone with a heavenly light. Her forehead looked bright and serene with a divine calm. All her physical expressions were suspended, yet from every pore of her body radiated an uncommon glow, a mute eloquence of silent inner speech. Everybody present felt that Mother was sinking into the depths of divine communion. and thus passed some 10 to 12 hours. And then efforts were made to bring her back to the physical plane with kirtan and the like, but all in vain. I myself failed to rouse her from that state of self-absorption. There was no response whatsoever when rubbing her hands or her feet, and even pricking them with sharp points. Her consciousness came back when the proper time arrived. It did not depend on any external stimulus. When Mother came back to physical consciousness, her breath returned and became deeper and deeper. Along with it revived all the movements of her limbs. On certain days, a short while after such an awakening, her body relapsed once more into its former inert condition and tended, as it were, to freeze again in the state of samadhi. When the eyelids were opened with fingertips, there was a vacant, unresponsive stare in her eyes, and the lids soon closed again automatically. When a series of symptoms of her revival into normal life became manifest, she was helped to a sitting posture, and by calling out to her loudly, attempts were made to awaken her to the world of sense and induce her to speak. In this twilight condition of consciousness, she responded to the call of the outside world only for a brief spell of time, again to sink back into the inmost depths of her being. In this state, it took much time for her to recover her normal condition. On one occasion, after such a spell of samadhi, she was made to walk with great difficulty. After taking a mouthful of food, her body relapsed into an unconscious, inert condition for several hours. But when, after samadhi, she recovered her normal state, her whole body appeared to be suffused with joy. On the threshold of reawakening, sometimes she would either laugh or weep and laugh at the same time. During samadhi, her face lost all freshness of life. The body appeared to be very frail and weak, and in her general appearance there was no expression whatsoever of either joy or pain. In that state, it took her much longer to recover her former self. In 1930, when she came to Ramna Ashram, she often appeared to have lost all signs of life during samadhi and passed 4 or 5 days together without any response to any outside stimulus. During the whole phase, from the beginning of the samadhi to its end, there was no indication that she had life or could ever recover it. Her body became as cold as ice and remained cold for a long time after consciousness returned. After recovering her full consciousness, when she was asked how she had felt during samadhi, she would only reply, "It is a state beyond all conscious and supraconscious planes, a state of complete immobilization of all thought, emotion, and activity, both physical and mental, a state that transcends all the phases of life. What you call savikalpa samadhi is also but a means to reach that final objective. It is only a passing stage in your sadhana. Deep concentration on any one of the 5 elementals of sense, sound, touch, smell, taste, and sight, derived chiefly from air, earth, and water, leads a man to merge his identity into it. And as concentration deepens, the body gradually freezes with it. Then that special object of sense pervades his whole being, and his ego gradually dissolves in it and coalesces with one universal entity. When this condition settles down, the consciousness of one universal self also melts away. And what then happens, no words, no expression or feeling can convey. At times, without any noticeable cause, many abnormal symptoms became visible on her person. Her breath became deep and prolonged. Her whole body would twist right or left with an expression of languor or fatigue. She would then lie down on the floor or roll up her body like a bundle. She had physical consciousness at that time, and when any question was put to her, she would respond with one or two words in a very faint and soft voice. On inquiry, we learned from her later that while she was in this condition, she would feel a fine thread-like upward current of life flowing from the lower end of the spinal cord right up to the topmost center in the brain, and along with it, a thrill of joy would run through every fiber of her body. And even though the pores of her hair, she would still feel at that time that every particle of her physical frame danced with the infinite ripples of bliss. Whatever she touched or saw appeared to her to be a vital part of herself. Her physical body gradually ceased to function. At this time, if her backbone was massaged or the joints of her body were rubbed for a long time, she would remain quiet for some time and recover her normal condition. It was at this stage that she was found to be brimming over with blissful joy, and her looks had all the indications of one lost in universal love. In the midst of the routine of everyday life, while Mother was lying down, smiling and talking to people that came to see her, it was found that her limbs had become ice cold, her nails and toes turned blue. Even by vigorous massage, the stiffness of her limbs could not be lessened, although the hands of those who rubbed her limbs became benumbed with cold. One day it took her nearly 12 hours to recover her normal warmth. One evening, just at dusk, Mother was lying in a state of samadhi. Our Didi Ma was on the bed by her side. Pitaji was also in the room. At about 2 a.m., I was seated on the veranda meditating on Mother's lotus feet. I felt a thrilling sensation in my heart produced by the sound of Mother's footsteps. I opened my eyes and could not notice anything. I heard some feeble sound inside the room. When I left my seat, I noticed 2 tiny footprints of Mother's wet feet. On entering the room, I found Mother in bed. I inquired from Didi Ma if Mother had gone out. The reply was, no. The night passed. The next morning, she was on the plane of consciousness for a brief interval. Though she recovered her sense on the following day, it took 3 or 4 days more to regain her normal ways of life. A few days later, I said to Mother, I have heard that during samadhi it is not possible for anybody to move about in his physical body. How was it that I noticed 2 of your footprints on the floor that night? Mother said, Is it possible for man to explain all things in words? And then the silence resumed. On one occasion I asked Mother, what are the signs of a sadhaka, one who strives hard for the spiritual upliftment? Mother said, when a devotee reaches a certain level of mental purity, he may behave like a child or become unresponsive to worldly stimuli like a clot of inert matter, or violate all canons of social life like one who is insane, or at times be swayed by flashes of higher thought or emotion and pass for a saint. But through all these varying modes of life, his aim remains fixed upon his central target. If at this stage he forgets his final aim, his progress is arrested there. But if with intense effort he strives on and on towards his goal, all his activities will center around his supreme objective. You will always find that even though he looks like a mass of inert matter, quite indifferent to external stimuli. He is full of cheerfulness and bliss as soon as he regains physical consciousness. Gradually, as this joyous mood settles down in him, all his relationship with men and things becomes imbued with the spirit of joy and happiness, so as to make him lovable and adorable to all. His inner and outer life become an expression of the one supreme bliss. At the next stage, the devotee reaches a level where even the concept of one universal existence melts away. Then his way of life cannot be explained by ordinary canons of human reasoning. In this condition, all the vibrations of his mind-body are suspended. There is every likelihood of the soul departing from the mortal frame. But if there is a residue of strong samskara, the persistent desire acquired from this previous birth, to alleviate the sufferings of humanity, to secure human welfare, well then, he may live for a certain period longer. Yet he remains unchanged under all circumstances of life. Although we think he is subject to change simply because he retains his body, the only difference between such a devotee and the yogi who gives up his body is that the yogi leaves his body by his own effort of will. Even at the moment of exit from the physical, he retains the consciousness that he has a body which he is leaving. Whereas the man who gives up his mortal frame in the absolute samadhi, the complete withdrawal into the universal cosmic soul, is neither conscious of an individual body nor of any effort to give it up. The samskaras about life and death cease to function in his soul, and as soon as the karma of his past lives is worked out, the body naturally drops off. On another occasion, Mother said in the course of conversation, "Purity of heart and mind comes through concentration on one unit of thought or idea, according to one's particular disposition. Gradually, as a man progresses, all his other scattered ideas come to be unified with this one object. Next, when various streams of thought flow along the same channel, the devotee becomes apparently motionless and inert. And thereafter he finds a resting place in the one universal being, and is engulfed in one unitary existence." Ordinarily, Mother does not say these things to all men. She sometimes stops suddenly in the course of conversation. She is usually surrounded by many bhaktas. What she utters for their welfare cannot always be recorded, and many of her ideas are not intelligible to everyone. Her instructions are of a universal type meant for all men and women, yet their real import is not always comprehended by people like us. Still, when some of her words illumine the mind of a particular person, what he realizes by his own limited knowledge finds expression in his life according to his own capacity to move forward. It is not easy to imagine how infinitely various are the streams of water flowing from the Himalayas to the plains of India, through glaciers, rivers, streamlets, and springs, enriching and fertilizing many sterile tracts. Although the Himalayas do not lose anything by sending out these perpetual streams, the welfare of the world is being secured by them. In a similar way, in the case of Mother and her devotees, we hardly find words to express the changes that little by little are coming upon us at every moment of our lives through her contact, her suggestions, words, and smiles. There is a false impression amongst us that if we try to express how her blessings have molded many little incidents of our everyday life, we shall be belittling her infinite grace. But I am inclined to feel that by such efforts we should only be singing hymns to her glory, as well as advance our spiritual upliftment in no small measure. At the same time, it would be a way of linking our grateful souls to her grace at every moment of our lives.